Welcome to another episode of SJS Recommends. Today we will start our journey into the world of Chiming Liang with his feature debut, Rebels of the Neon God from 1992. And this is one of those films that, even though it's a debut, it doesn't really feel like a debut as it has this kind of fully formed style already in it, and it's a really well-made movie. And Chiming Liang, again, is a Taiwanese new wave director, one of the big three, I would say, with Edward Yang and Hou Xiaoshen. And I think Edward Yang and Hou Xiaoshen are quite similar to each other in many ways, but I think Chiming Liang is kind of the black sheep of the three in a way that his style is quite different. And I found his work really fascinating for a few years now. I think I got into him in the beginning of the pandemic back in like 2020, early 2020, and I started going through his filmography in a chronological order. So I started with Rebels of the Neon God, then did Vive l'Amour, and then The River, and those two we are going to do soon as well in the podcast. And he is known to be this kind of a, I think, love or hate type of director a bit, that many people say that, again, he has such a kind of eccentric, weird style that you either get it or not. But I feel like I've been able to get into his wavelength from the start. Although if you look at my letterbox, for example, I haven't given many of his films like the full 5 stars, that I often rate his films like 4 or 4.5. So I don't think that they are often like quite my personal favorites, but I really enjoy his work and can find it very fascinating. And he's one of the more interesting directors of the kind of slow cinema movement, you could say, as he has a very particular style that doesn't necessarily remind you of Belatar or Tarkovsky or many of those other directors, but he has his very, very much of his own thing. But I think it's a bit risky for us to do many of his films on the podcast, because I think that his films are very similar in a way that we might be repeating ourselves a lot when we start getting into his other films after this. But hopefully we can find unique analysis for each of these films. Yeah, but let's get into it now. So I'll ask Altaz, what did you think of this film?
I love this film. Yeah, this is a great film. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciated the style, and like you said, so for me, it was from play. The movie started, and I was all in. So certain films and filmmakers are just like that for me. This was I was all in. So I really enjoyed this film. Yeah, and unbelievable as a debut film, to be honest. To be that mature in the sensibility of style and all that, and have a unique voice right from the get go. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and I think this is many people's favorite Chiming Liang film, or at least one of their favorites, which you just cannot say for most
Mm.
debuts. I think the best comparable film for this from our podcast history is probably Millennium Mambo,
Mm.
as they
Mm.
can tackle some of the similar themes, and even stylistically there are certain similarities. But like I said in the intro, Chiming Liang has very much of his own style, and it's a bit more kind of disgusting in a way, like when we see one of the apartments and the
Yeah,
water is
yeah, yeah,
flowing there, and then we
yeah,
see
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
cockroaches. And I think this film actually has lots of kind of dry humor. Maybe at first you don't see the humor, but I think, for example, the
yeah.
cockroach, like when he takes it and like throws it out of the window, and then it comes back to the window, and even
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the rundown apartment, it's like kind of funny when the water just keeps coming, even though he puts the towel in there again and again, and those
Hmm.
things, even though they obviously are kind of disgusting and sad, but also in a weird way they are a bit funny.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to have lived in Southeast Asia to maybe pick up on some of that as well, in a sense, the humor behind it, because, like, obviously I lived in Myanmar and stuff like that. So sometimes when I watch some of these films, it takes me back to those those worlds, and yeah, there will be those challenges in certain apartments and these kinds of things. So you could, yeah, you could definitely see the humor, the morbid humor, uh there. It's kind of like, what you would see in a Harold and Maude, like that. You're young, you're disaffected youth, but there's a, yeah, there's just this frustration, and all that. So I think that like comes across, I thought, really well. Like you can definitely see the humor, and yeah, there's so much I want to talk about, but let's wait for the spoiler part for that.
And I think again, like I said in the beginning, it's kind of Tsai Ming Liang is kind of a love or hate director, but I think I could recommend this film to people who have interest in Taiwanese film, who have interest in slow cinema, and also kind of these slice of life drama films, and who are interested in like alienation as a theme. Obviously, that's a running theme in this podcast, and we've talked so much about it, but we will continue to talk about it as again many of these art house films just tackle that modern day alienation and aimlessness and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, it's the alienation, but for me also as well, it just really speaks to, I think, conflicts and challenges I felt growing up. Um, you know, being like an immigrant in Canada, seeing my dad kind of work as a driver. So there's so much I could like connect with, and this feeling, this inexplicable. And I think this is um, what I already really appreciate about Chai Ming Liang in this film is that it's hard to pin down in words what a particular feeling and mindset is when you're going through something or you're in a particular environment. And what I appreciate in this film is that he's not trying to do that. He's not trying to put it in words. It's like he's trying to create the feeling. And that is really stands out. How you create that feeling, like you said, all that stuff, that bit of humor and absurdity where you're just so over it, flooded apartments or cockroaches or this and that. It's that the creation of that mind state is what I really appreciated. Like you could understand the states of mind of the characters in there as this is being played out. So really unique film, I think.
yeah. One of the things that we know Chai Ming Liang for is that he's more of a kind of visual storyteller. So many of his films don't have much dialogue, or
Mm,
some of them barely have any dialogue. I mean, this film actually has a bit more dialogue than most of his films. So he likes to show rather than tell things, and then he likes to, again, we often see what the characters feel through their faces and what they do rather than what they say. So
mm,
I really like that. Okay, you don't always have to have like lots of exposition and like long
mm.
drawn out dialogue scenes to talk about humanity. Sometimes this type of approach works really well.
Yeah, I think it's one of the, I could already say like it would be in my top for films about youth culture and disaffected youth and uh, you know ennui in youth and rebelliousness in youth and all that kind aimlessness and all that. It's in the tops. It just like you said, it's that visual storytelling that it tells you what you need to understand about the sort of kind of experience and pockets and cultures and subcultures, and the fact that it's also happening in big city in Taipei and all that, and you get to learn very quickly. I mean, I think that shows a great director because he helps you understand that world very quickly, and that really amazed me because of course I have a little bit of exposure because the immigrant experience in Vancouver means there are immigrants from different parts of the world, especially a lot from Southeast Asia. So some of that culture or style and all that was in like people I knew. So it helped me see, oh, the world they must have been coming from, or their parents must have been coming from. And that, I think that's really amazing. And then having kind of some exposure living and traveling through that part of the world. And so I'm like, it's amazing how you can do that, is really build that world really well. So someone who maybe has no experience can kind of come in and then immediately start understanding the different dynamics and challenges. So yeah, it's a great film.
Yeah. And now we could get into the spoiler territory, even though again it's a type of film that where the spoilers don't matter that much in my opinion. But we can now continue with the aesthetic discussion in the start of the spoiler discussion a little bit. So of course it's a really kind of beautifully shot film, even though lots of the imagery is very again disgusting in these rundown apartments and one of these like awful hotel or whatever and stuff. But like the shots themselves are very methodical and very well thought out, and also the editing I think is very good. And often his films have this bit more of a kind of a disgusting look. He made this film called The Hole, like a few years after this, I think in '98, and that also really relies on this kind of disgusting element with these rundown apartments. So I think he likes that, and of course we really get the sense of this modern city environment and how Taipei is changing and developing. We have the arcade game like place and like all the lights and the traffic and everything, so it kind of really gives you that sense of modern day city world and that alienation where people are very lonely even though there are people around everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think and that's something really difficult to get right, and I think that's where I think some of the humor comes in to show the way people cope with being in that kind of oppressive environment, because it's oppressive in so many levels. One way it's oppressive because there's this kind of this tradition, and then there's history, and then there's this even superstition and beliefs. And I'm not trying to insult the belief system, but I'm talking about the world of the film, and I think where the film is going, it's looking at that ennui being created by such an oppressive environment. So it's like the heat and the humidity. So there are all these different aspects of oppression. So one is, this pressure to go out and do something and achieve something, when it's, how do you compete when there's so many people trying to do the exact same thing? So entering these packed classrooms in this heat, in this humidity, one kind of oppression. Another is the system oppression, right? How the authorities work, how the law enforcement works, and then the parents. Then there's the tradition, the belief systems. Then yeah, those are a few, but I think that there are probably more. Like you said, the city itself is a character, so that concrete jungle, that sort of oppression, that everything is tight, closed. There isn't space. There isn't openness. Yeah.
And I think the kind of motorcycles are very kind of clever way of showing how small you are in a big city, how you don't really have any kind of value or matter because you're just going in this huge mass with your small motorcycle and you don't have really that much individuality. You are just part of that huge herd in the city. So that kind of shows also the aimlessness and everything. And I think that, and you mentioned the parents, but they are kind of very typical of what we, I guess, think about like Asian parents that, you must go to college and take these classes and become like a doctor or whatever. And then they, of course, are very disappointed when he drops out from that, as you would expect. So this film like really tackles many of those um, very essential parts of the culture of many different Asian countries, and I think this kind of Asian parent thing is like very prevalent in many of the richer Asian countries, especially, and probably in the other Asian countries as well. And yeah, the scene where he goes to the math class is like it's like very uncomfortable looking because there's so many people and the spaces are so small, and like compared to what I've experienced in the university when the classes usually aren't even full, so like it looks just so uncomfortable and very alienating in a way. You have lots of people around you, but you don't have any connection to them, and they are just kind of almost like emotionless mass that you just don't know anything about them. They are just there, and that's like a very kind of horror image to me in a way. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean yes, 100%. Like that scene where he goes in the classroom is just mind blowing because that's when you see what he's up against in life and what each of them in that room are up against in life. And that is one of the things that is so great about this film is one scene tells you a lot in just a few seconds. I mean, that scene, I don't even know if it lasts a minute with that, where he goes and he's like going in late and he's trying to find his chair. And right away, you can understand his mindset because you're like, okay, he has to go into this. His parents don't understand about what he's going to need to do. Uh, right. So, like, but they're just like, you just do it because that's what you're supposed to do. And you're supposed to try to create a better life for yourself. And obviously, he's sitting there and asking how and perhaps why as well. Like, who am I really? And then, so the whole plot is about just the little, in some ways, almost petty things that you are so important to you and can almost make you feel a sense of empowerment or even individuality for a few moments.
Yeah, and I think we have this kind of a, you could say, generational clash here a bit when we see these young people and their life, like again the two guys and the woman who gets really drunk. We see like heavy drinking, casual sex, and things like that. And also the classroom kind of represents how maybe these days you won't get ahead by again taking college classes. Like it is often that few decades into the past, if you got a college degree, you knew that you would get a like a good job, good like office job that you could make a good living. But then as society has progressed and more people are doing that, then it isn't a guarantee anymore. Now you are just part of that huge mass of people who are all doing the same exams and the same classes, and then you have to be like truly extraordinary to make something of yourself. So we really see that develop in Taipei and how again the new generations have different problems than the previous generations, and then the previous generations like maybe will think that you are lazy, like good for nothing person, like if you don't reach that success, even though it's a very different world and maybe a more challenging world now.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add to what you're saying, what I find interesting, because right now, obviously, I'm watching a lot of Taiwanese New Wave films. So, like you said, Edward Yang. So, the two of them together almost creates a great universe to understand what's going on in that time period in Taiwan, in Taipei. And because Edward Yang kind of focuses on different aspects, And when you put the two together, you can see the whole system in a way, because in Edward Yang's films, like Taipei Story, you have they're showing kind of some of the corporate culture, uh, you know, created by multinationals coming into Taiwan, outsourcing the kind of computer revolution, at the time of Microsoft and like IBM in the 90s. And, they're just moving centers into Taipei. And then you can understand from Rebels of the Neon God the pressure it creates, because it's like, you go learn this, go learn computers, go learn this particular trade. So then you can basically jump on that, catch that thread, and then you can have a better life. So then you don't have to be, a taxi driver just driving around these like congested streets, and with these rebellious, disaffected youth that don't have much respect for anything, because how are they supposed to have respect for anything? So I think what's really good also is the lack of value judgment, that this is his person's good and this person's bad. Like I even think that it's not even taking the angle where it's making the parents enemies, but they're just saying the parents are trying their best, but they don't understand what their children are up against, and the children can't fully appreciate because of what they're going into, just what state the parents are in and what they've had to struggle with in their life. So it's a really dynamic world. Um,
And I think in many of these Taiwanese films, there is the idea of like different generations. Of course, in Yi Yi, the thing is that we explore this family with in different generations. Although Edward Yang does it in a way kind of more, I guess, bit more peaceful and kind of clean way. He doesn't
mm,
really show as much these kind of disgusting apartments and stuff. And like Yi Yi is a very beautiful looking film in more of a kind of traditional beauty
mm,
type of way. But Hao Xiaoshen is also known for like looking at different generations of Taiwanese people, like going back in the past, like a few decades, and then also exploring these ideas in the
mm,
current day. And through these generational explorations, we can see kind of the development of the Taiwanese identity. And I think many Taiwanese people can probably really relate to this film and kind of see how Taiwanese society has progressed. And of course, it's also very interesting to look at these things like now in the 2020s, as we know that Taiwan now is like one of the more progressive Asian countries, one of the more well-off Asian countries. But when we explore these films from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, we can see how that developed through this art. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, and I think the challenge also is when we talk about well-off countries, uh, right? Because there's so much about the economic progress of certain countries, right? Even in that region or globally, and like you said, Edward Yang explores a certain thing. Simon Liang a different way, but what that does is even in the current day, an awareness that progress and wealth is built on the backs of or at the expense of a whole mass of people, especially in certain regions of the world where they're very populous. It's like to get that sliver of elite, sliver of well being, there is a whole mass of people that are living, like you said, in those kinds of apartments, and they 100% exist, and it's not even an exaggeration. That's the thing. It's like it's not an exaggeration at all. And to even take you for a little while and say, just imagine, what do you do, right? What do you do? What do you feel? Uh, what is the experience? And are they not still human? Did they still not feel? Did they still not uh, need? And so yeah, all these themes are really in there and really powerful. And I think it'll also be interesting to discuss, like you had already mentioned, the motorcycles, but even, yeah, to talk a little bit about how the film is made, because how it's made is just really important in the feeling you get, and the ideas and the thoughts and the emotions you really get from how the film's made and how it's sequenced. um, you know, and how you feel about each of the characters. Because you have At Atsu, and he's kind of like the antagonist, right? He's the one who we start with. He's sitting in bed, the flooded apartment, and all that. And it's really through an action he takes that we kind of get the events of the story, the plot of the story. But it's how you feel about him as the film goes. That's the real achievement, I think. Um,
Yeah, but I think again the main male characters are okay. They are different people, but at the same time they are kind of the same in a way, like how they are both
yes,
very alienated and like obviously the guy who lives with his parents, he has a bit of a nicer place and stuff, but still they kind of have the same issues, the same alienation and isolation, and the same kind of aimlessness in their lives that they aren't really going anywhere. They just exist. And this is a very existential film in that way that it's just trying to find your place in the world, and that in this type of world where there is no place for people, there's just that very strict, rigid idea of what it means to be a person, and you cannot exist beyond that. And I think earlier you said that obviously this film has lots of these kind of petty, kind of small events, and these people have these kind of petty and small kind of obsessions, you could say. And I think that's probably kind of that's like a very good way of exploring also bigger themes, because this is what life is to most people. It's not about these grand hero stories, but it's these small things that happen in your apartment when you are just at home at peace, and these kind of very small things in your daily life. Okay, most of our lives aren't that grand and big where these huge things happen, but life is more about these small details, these minutia. Yeah.
I agree with you. Yes, it's definitely uh, the macro and the micro inside the micro, in which I really enjoy, and I actually agree with that perspective. Uh, Now, interesting thing that you said, like that they are the same, and I think yes and no. That they are children of the same system in a way. However, their conflict I could really relate with, because there are different kinds of children in a way, right? So obviously, Hatsu and Aping, they are introduced to us as being into petty crime, right? Excuse me. Um, with that incredible scene in the rain, where they go and they tap the coins from the phone booth. I mean, incredible. Like right away, you see that scene and you're like, wow, what a film, right? Um, how it's, um, in a way, such a big opening, even though it's about a microcosm. And then we see them all these kinds of things. Okay, they're going to steal the motherboards from the video games and try to, like hawk them on the market, and all these kinds of things. And then the other boy, the one from the, you know home with the parents, and I forget what his name is, because you have the two, they're in battle in a sense, right? How they're going to come into each other's world. He is actually a good kid, in the sense that he's trying to do right. He's trying to do right by the parents. He's sitting there. We see him. He's trying to study. So there's a contrast. Here's the kids that are going out petty crime. Here's the kid, and he's trying to study, but he's up against this oppressive system. And then there's that wonderful scene, which as a teenager, so many people have experienced, including myself, where he's sitting there and he's watching them, and what he sees is an image. This guy's on a bike. Oh, he's cool. He's rebellious. He's cool. He's on a nice bike. There's a girl on his back. Now, what's really powerful about that is, as the audience, we know there's more to the story. We know how that girl got on the motorbike. But what it emphasizes really well is the perspective of when we look at each other and how fragmented it is. So for that good kid, he's like, see, I'm in this system where I'm trying to do good and there's no reward. There's all this competition. I'm completely oppressed. I'm not going to get anywhere in this world. All right. And then he watches that and he's like, look at dudes like that who are just living for the moment, rebels without a cause. I think it's a little play on, even though I haven't seen the film Rebels Without a Cause. I know you love it. Tony loves it. And I love Nicholas Ray, so I want to see it. But I think it's a play on that. And he's seeing this rebel character, right? This guy's flippant. It's a big fu to authorities. And he's kind of the Lord. In this kind of system, these kinds of people are kings. I'm sorry, I need to stop because I forgot to connect my charger. Sorry about that. My apologies. Yeah, so before the laptop shuts down. Yeah, so yeah, people like that are king, and they just run around rampant. So he associates this with what's wrong with the world in a way, and him doing that to his father is like an insult to him and his powerlessness, and he needs to get that even with this person. But as an audience, what we also learn about is just like you said, that they're kind of the same person because they're being oppressed by the same system. And so Alta's life is not better because with this girl he can't open up, he can't love her, he can't connect. He's alone. His brother is always gone. This flooded apartment. We can talk about what the water again. So much water in this film again. And by the end, like everything just goes wrong, and he's like, I'm having a bad day. Like I've just run out of luck. It's just so affecting.
Yeah, and one thing to mention about the guy who lives in his family's apartment is that he's kind of a regular actor in Chai Ming-liang's films, and he's kind of his muse because Chai Ming-liang is a kind of gay director, and there's often this kind of male gaze into like these male characters here, and even this film, like you can see him taking interest in the guy with the motorcycle and stuff. So there's that kind of longing and kind of love seeking there as well. And then you mentioned the water again, as we often analyze the water in Tarkovsky's films and stuff, but I think it's kind of is showing how in this modern world there are so many kind of outside factors that affect our life in a negative way that we cannot escape. And the water, obviously, you are kind of drowning in a way in this world with these constant problems and this alienation. You never breathe. You constantly have to hustle and try out new things and try to progress, even if there are no opportunities to do that. So it's that constant anxiety, and obviously that idea of drowning in the water. It's just a perfect kind of metaphor for anxiety and depression and things like that. Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing that because that adds a dimensionality to something like I guess I observed and felt while watching this movie, but I did not kind of see it in a practical sense in terms of where what his particular perspective may be. But yes, I did feel like the exploration uh, of male relationships was quite beautiful, but and quite unique. The exploration of masculinity in this film I felt was quite unique, in the way that the vulnerability was shown in such an interesting way, and even in a way that I could connect with. Like, I could connect much more with the uh, clash of the identity and vulnerability. And it's really interesting you mentioned the water and the drain, because it made me think of something. So um, some time back or whatever, I would have these dreams where it would be like backed up plumbing. I won't give too much detail in my dream, and it would be this like terror feeling, and it's just this drain is backing up, and the water is like you can't go through the drain. So I just happened out of curiosity to say, okay, what kind of things does that relate to psychologically? So one thing it said is that there's emotional backup. So there's emotional blockage. It's an image that can symbolize in a dream emotional blockage, and you need clearing. You're looking to clear a lot of emotional baggage. And I just wonder that, because it seems that it's possible to have that reading in this film too, that blocked drain and the water just coming up, and everything is just blocked, um, could similarly symbolize emotional blockage, just a stuck point in the system, a bottleneck, like things are just not flowing anymore. Obviously, you are in Asia, so the idea of water and flowing water and balance and all that, there's clearly a lack of balance because things are just backed up, and um, drains getting stuck. And you used to get this a lot in Myanmar as well, just practically, when it was rain season, because it would push all this dirt into the drains and they would block, and then you would have basically, you know 1 meter, you'd have this high water like all around the city that you'd have to walk through. That'd be really grungy and all that. So it reminded me of that as well. So definitely some kind of blockage, societal, emotional, uh, balance with nature, all kinds of things potentially. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned your dream because I actually also had a dream this week about like kitchen sink like dripping some
Mm,
water, and then my again stepfather was still alive and he was fixing the sink
that's
and stuff.
interesting.
So, and I'm actually thinking that what day I had that dream, because I think it might have been after I watched Rebels of the Neon God. So maybe it came with
Mhm.
the movie. I think it might have been that night actually, but I didn't actually um connect the film to that dream then. But now I kind of realize that yeah, they are probably related. And I think I was just started to think that when we think about kind of the harsh side of many Asian cultures, we do think about the apartments a lot and how small they are. And like I think it's maybe more associated with Japan than Taiwan, but I think many of these Asian countries, like people live in these like really small apartments, and your home is supposed to be your again refuge where you can relax. But when your apartment is so small and so run down, you cannot escape your worries even when you go to your home. So that's why even your home starts feeling very alienating, and you feel like you're drowning even in your home because of that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's like you're absolutely right that all that is in there. It's like there's so much texture in the film in terms of emotional depth. And it's like even that first scene, or not first scene, but initial, when he's studying there and there's that cockroach and he takes the like the compass or whatever and pins it down. It's like he's doing that out of humor, out of frustration, out of a bunch of things. But in a way, it's self analysis, a self reflection. It's like that's how he feels. He's that cockroach, and he's being pinned there. You know what? there's some force that's greater and that can make you do whatever it wants. You know, you can just pin you down until you just drown, like you said, you drown and you just die just because you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. It's so, you know, oppressive. It's just powerfully oppressive. Like there's just nowhere to go. You're stuck, but he's making another thing stuck. It's like catharsis and that kind of cruelty. And then again, you see that theme play back when he gets even with that guy. He feels like, yeah, you know, I achieved something, but what did you really achieve? All that guy did was break the mirror on your dad's taxi. It resulted in a bad day for you because you're almost having this moment where you might be able to connect with your father. Your father is light for a second, just for that moment. Uh, and he's like, let's go to a movie. We haven't got there. You feel like they're just about to have some sort of connection, and he's going to get his father back for a few moments. And that guy ruined it by breaking that taxi mirror. And then it's like, I have to go get this guy. He's kind of doing it to avenge his father or to regain the honor of his father. Because at the end of the day, that's how you feel. Because I kind of, I didn't grow up like that, but I grew up in similar, in a dynamic that I can understand. You know, seeing my father work certain jobs and all that stuff and be treated certain ways. I felt that too. You know, I need to get that honor for my father back. But it's like his father doesn't even know that's what the child is really motivated by. To him, he's just like, he's a lost kid. You know, I don't want to deal with him anymore. I don't want to bother. So that dynamic is so well uh, portrayed and so real. Yeah, so real.
And even one thing that we can add to also this idea of the home is because, of course, your home, the place where you live, it really represents the success of your life and what you have done with your life, and whether what is your position in the kind of class hierarchies and things like
Mm.
that. And then when you live in these boxes and don't have that many opportunities, it's you are just so stuck, like you said, and you cannot dream about anything else because you are just so confined, and you have both those like actual like real like walls around you, but then you also have those mental walls around you, and there's like a very strong connection with again the like the concrete, the real material world, and then the emotional, psychological world of these characters. So
Yeah, you're right. And the chase for the material and the material being a symbol, and you have a little bit of material, you get everything. And if you don't have it, what you need materially in terms of money or status or whatever, then you don't get anything. And you have that really haunting, strange, in a way, haunting, strange ending. Like that's almost like quoting Paris, Texas, and he's like in that call center, and he's going there so he can just basically have this conversation with a girl. And I don't know if you eventually get to have contact with the girl. It seemed to say that, oh, you'll have a conversation, and then if you get along, then you can see her in person. So I don't know if it's a gateway to an ultimately an escort service, but there's that really strange, I wouldn't say strange, but I mean it's just all of a sudden because it's like the film's going in a certain way, and then there's just a scene that leaves you feeling like, what does exactly that end scene mean? Where he doesn't answer the phone, and then he just walks off, and the film just kind of ends. You just get the shot of the Taipei that we've been in, and then that's it. The film's over. So really ambiguous ending. Who is his call? Is he not taking? Kind of thing.
but I think ultimately it shows that the cycle will continue, and the alienation will continue, and the modern day life will stay the same, and you will stay part of that same mass, and again those calls don't change anything. So I think that's kind of what it is saying.
But yeah, I mean, so like one way is like you could think of is is that he's at a impasse where it's like he's now so lonely and all that stuff that he's just like turning to wherever to get to find love or attention or affection in any way he can. But him walking away, is that a kind of a hopefulness in him still? Like, I still believe I can find love for myself. Or is it more like metaphysical, like that there's a call coming to you and he's deciding not to answer the call? I don't know. I love the ending. It's just very ambiguous. And it leaves you just thinking, like, what does that last scene mean?
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting. And now that you talked about it, I realized that it's more interesting than I originally thought. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like interesting. The reason I also find it interesting is you close the story, right? He gets his revenge. That guy is down and he is up in his mind. But that guy was always down. That's what the audience knows, that he doesn't realize that that guy was never up. He may have had a nice motorbike and he had a girl for a while or whatever it is, but he was never up. He's in a flooded apartment, which again, you're right. The symbolisms, I see it more and more what you're saying, because it's almost like you can't keep the outside world out. It's just flooding your apartment. There is no uh, solitude. There is no sanctuary. There's nothing. It's invading you from the outside. Like there's nowhere to go. Uh, and so that guy is never up, and then he gets his revenge, and he kind of, okay, I avenged my father, and haha, it's kind of a fun thing, like a play on the title, because the mother says, oh, he's the reincarnation of the neon god, and he's the god, and that guy effed with God, right? And so that guy's gonna have a very, very bad day, but the guy was always having a bad day. So the revenge means something and means nothing all at the exact same time. And then you have the scene, because after he's closed that and distracted himself with that revenge journey, where is he now? And then he's in this strange call center, uh, or kind of this where you just go and talk to girls for company, or and then you're like, okay, that's interesting. Why is he there now? After closing that journey, now what is he battling and struggling with? So it's I think it has something to say, but I'm lost to say what exactly it is. But it made an impact on me because that's very conscious decision to close the loop of a story and then add something that didn't really relate to the story in some ways. And in ways it does relate to it because he's so lonely and alien. He's looking for love. He's looking. That's more literal, but I think there's more levels to that ending.
Yeah, I think you can analyze it in and have many different interpretations, like you said. But now I started thinking about again another kind of symbolic thing in the film. Again, the cockroach that we already
Yeah.
talked about. Obviously, again, the home symbolizes a lot, but just the small cockroach can also symbolize a lot of things. Obviously, it shows kind of poverty and that kind of bad luck and that disgusting side. Like that's the kind of surface level thing. But we can also think how all these unescapable problems and also some people in your life can be cockroaches that just are part of your life, and you just cannot get rid of these things because they are everywhere all around you, and
Mm.
that's just the wheel of life that you cannot escape. There are these constant cockroach like things in your life that no matter if you kill one of them, there will be another one replacing it. Or even
Yeah.
if you think that you kill that one cockroach, it might even come back like the cockroach comes back to the window. So yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's I agree with that reading for sure. You can't beat it. No matter what you do, the more will come. It's really like, yeah, powerful. That imagery, those imageries, even like little imageries where the apartment's flooded again, and you're like, here we go again, and then the sandal is like floating, and just like they're just these images that are really amazing. Like you said, like I feel the same way, that it's like I rate these films as very high, but not the highest as I could give. But I also when you think about what we're discussing, you wonder that is it because he decides to play in a certain kind of space, you almost, they feel like his aesthetic doesn't fully raise to the best you see from Edward Yang, or is it just as amazing, and it's just over the years it will just keep growing on you, because there are some images that just don't leave your head after you see that film. You keep seeing them and they disturb you.
Yeah, Choi Ming Liang is someone who definitely really sticks with you and you think about his films a lot. And I also think that there are some films in his filmography that surpass this one. And I think again the next one we will talk about Vive l'Amour. I think that's many people's favorite or one of their favorites. And then of course in our community many people have talked about Goodbye Dragon Inn, which is a bit different also. And then at some point we will probably do the Wayward Cloud as well, which is my favorite one. And that's available in the Internet Archive website.
And Days is his film too, right? Days?
Yeah, which you are going to see soon.
Yeah, I'm seeing tomorrow. So there's going to be a lot of Chai Ming Liang. So it's going to be very interesting to see a lot of his.
Yeah, in Days you will really see the kind of exploration of masculinity and that side of his work. And it's a later work. It only came out in 2020, so it has a bit of a different thing. But it also has the actor who lives with his parents in Rebels of the Neon God. But obviously now he's way older, like 30 years later. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm definitely intrigued after this film and excited to see more of his films.
Yeah, but now we can maybe start wrapping it up. And like we just said, okay, we will do Vive l'Amour in a couple of weeks. It was his next film. After Rebels of the Neon God, it came out in 1994. And then a couple of weeks after that, we will do River, which is his third film. So there's this kind of nice chronological order here in the podcast, even though you will see Days, which is a later work, but we can kind of explore the evolution of his style when we do these early works and see how he kind of refines his style a bit by bit, and but also kind of how he tackles many of the similar themes in many of his films.
Yeah, sounds good. It sounds really good.
Yeah. And Chai Ming Liang, if you viewers are interested, I mean, he's a director that, again, many people discuss him in the cinephile community these days. I think especially in Letterboxd, there is a pretty big community of people who like really love his stuff. And there was also a podcast about him in YouTube recently. I think it's called like Provocateur podcast. So it's Provocateur Chai Ming Liang. If you put that out in YouTube search, you should find it. And it was a really good podcast. It's kind of like an overview of his stuff. So yeah.
Sounds good, yeah. Sounds really good.
But anyway, in the next episode, we will return to Asian cinema with something quite different. So it's Lee Chang-dong's Oasis. Yeah. But anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.